Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being right here. We've got a good topic for you today, and very similar to yesterday with one different word. What is the most horrific thing that you have ever witnessed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I took care of my mom after her husband shot her. She was in a lot of pain, but also heartbroken. She almost died of sepsis, but survived. The worst thing was seeing her crying in bed, heartbroken and sad, while machines tried to pump blood from her wound and keep her alive. I've never seen anyone look so lonely and broken. She remarried and is happy now. I found my mom passed away in her sleep from cardiac arrest. I just got her the keys to her new apartment that day, and I came into the boarding house peering and knocking through her window to see her not moving. Not thinking anything of it, maybe deep sleep. Childhood, she overdosed on her depression medication a lot. I left and came back to see her still in the same position. I had to help carry her out as well. I was behind a Harley-Davidson street glide on I-25 south of Denver, my home from work one night. Middle lane of the three, about 200 feet back, cruise control set at about 85 miles per hour, just following this bike for the next few miles until my exit. I've had motorcycles in the past. I like riding, so I'd rather follow this Harley than an 18-wheeler or a Subaru. Plus, I'm not right on this tailpipe like a lot of drivers out here would be. Symbiotic relationship. There was a black-haired man driving and a blonde woman riding behind. I know their hair colors because there's no helmet law in Colorado, and the detail comes into play in just a few seconds. The rear tire must have been punctured by something on the road. It didn't blow out, but it definitely started losing air fast, because the ass end of that bike started to swing side to side, and it was getting farther with each wobble. The rider lets off the throttle, and I see him look over to his right shoulder, but by the time I could say, "Oh, F," it was too late. The bike's back tire is leaving S-curves on the concrete road, and once it swung too far to the left, it suddenly caught an edge and flipped. He didn't even have time to try to lay it down in front of himself and his passenger. That bike barrel rolled 8 times right in front of me. The woman flew off after 1 or 2 rolls and started rolling along the road. The man held on for about 4 flips, leaning forward over his handlebars, but then his skull exploded. I realize I'm just repeating OF, 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 OF. As this scene is unfolding in front of me, I'm still driving a car at 70 miles per hour, and now I have to dodge motorcycle parts and human bodies, swerving within my middle lane, trying not to hit cars on either side, and also not run over this effing lady who's sliding along in front of my bumper. I slam on my brakes, then hit my hazard lights and jump out into traffic and almost get hit by a car in the left lane. There's not really heavy traffic at this hour, but still a lot of cars on the interstate, and the first 10 or so do not realize what has just happened. I am not a medical professional. I'm not trained for any type of emergency triage situations, but I ran up to the woman to see if I could help. She was wearing leathers, so she actually wasn't scraped up with road rash, but her hands were bloody messes, and she might have broken some ribs or damaged her lungs because she couldn't speak or catch her breath, and her back was effing broken. She couldn't move her legs, and she had pissed herself, but she kept trying to turn and crawl toward the man, saying his name in a forced whisper. So I get up to go check on him and pull my cell phone out as I jog up to him to call 911. I tell them there was a motorcycle crash and give the closest exit, and the operator asks how many people involved, and I tell her 2 were on the bike. We need 2 ambulances, but then I see the man. We only need 1 ambulance. The entire left side of this man's face was just gone. I could see his teeth through his cheek. I could see where his jaw broke. His ear was just a small black hole in a bloody mess. His skull looked like the shell of a boiled egg after it had been cracked on the edge of the sink. I could see the wrinkly, off-white mass of brain where huge chunks of bone were missing. His left eye was gone. His right eye was open and staring. I checked for a pulse just to make sure, and then I got up to go back to the woman. I left my jacket balled up on the road near his head to block her view. She was still trying to move towards him, crawling without the use of her legs. I sat down on the road at her head and told her that she was badly injured and she needed to lay flat until the ambulance got there. I told her he was badly injured too, but help was on the way. I told her it would only be a few more minutes and then she'd be able to see him. By the time, lots of other cars had stopped and another driver gave me a blanket. I folded it into a pillow and told her to lay her head in my lap until the medics got there. I told her about my job as a golf course and my yellow lab I had growing up, how good a drummer Danny Carvey was. I just kept saying words. I just kept talking to her so that she wouldn't ask me if the man was okay, if he was alive, if he had been hurt. By the time the ambulances and fire truck showed up, there was a stream of blood from the middle lane all the way over to the right shoulder of the interstate. My jacket was soaked in it. I left it there. I went home and laid flat on my back in the dark and thought about my yellow lab. That's just terrible. I'm sorry you had to see that. Now, as a child of the 80s, I grew up, I've never worn a helmet on a bicycle, even to this day. Now, to some people, that's a foreign concept. But motorcycles, I've always been like, how would you do that and not want to wear one? Could have saved a life here. What do you guys think? Probably my mom having a seizure, a common occurrence. She has a seizure disorder and suffers a few different types of seizures. They are different from what you imagine a typical seizure to be, although she has those too. Nothing compares to seeing your mom with bulging eyeballs, completely incoherent, speaking gibberish, sometimes foaming at the mouth and peeing herself. She cries like a baby sometimes while seizing. She has fallen down and fractured, bruised, hurt, broken so many body parts over the years because she seizes often in the middle of the night when everyone is sleeping. She has literally wandered out of the house during one of these episodes, and we had a drone and several officers looking for her for hours. It's horrific to witness her having the seizures, but it's more horrific to know that she will probably have these for the rest of her life, and they will probably lead to further health complications later on down the road. And we still haven't found a medication that suits her. The doctor and hospitals treat her horribly because they don't understand her condition. I would go on, and about the struggles she faces with her disorder. Thanks for reading. Edit. Thank you all for the comments. I don't open up about this a lot because many people can't relate to it. Your replies have made me feel less alone, and I may even share them with my mom so she knows she is not alone. Have a blessed day. Came upon an accident once that a teen was thrown from the vehicle. He was laying in some people's yard. When I went to see if he was alive, I found he had a hole in his chest almost as big as my hand. He was unconscious and wasn't able to breathe, so I held my hand over the hole to seal it, and he could then breathe. I did this for at least a half an hour until the ambulance got there. He died anyway. I was standing outside a theater waiting for a friend. We were going to see a play together, and an old man on the other side of the street drew my attention. He was watching the traffic, looking for an opening so he could jaywalk. It's a very busy road, and there are signs everywhere warning people to cross at the intersection, but I guess he thought it was too far out of the way. He was quite old and stooped and had a cane, so he didn't move very fast and was about halfway across the road when he was hit by a truck going about 55 miles per hour. He cartwheeled into the air way higher than seemed possible and hit the ground with a very loud thud that I can still hear to this day. Blood everywhere, and he was alive for a few minutes before succumbing. His family was inside the theater waiting for him. I guess he'd gone to park the car. The police officer had to go in and tell them he'd died. Their screaming was heartbreaking. The theater still performed the play, but it was a very subdued audience that night. My nephew passed away at only 1 month old due to heart complications. When the funeral started, someone picked the baby up out of the casket and handed the dead child to his mother. My poor brother and his wife, the parents of the deceased child, are in shock that someone took their child out of the casket and put the child in his parents' arms. That's not even all. They proceeded to take family photos with the child and the still living child. The living child is only 3 and doesn't understand. She just keeps poking at her mom and loudly asking why won't the baby wake up. The whole church was utterly silent, and we just waited for my brother and his wife to freak out. Somehow they kept it together. At the gravesite, the preacher asked the parents of the child to carry the casket to the grave, which they did. Halfway to the grave, my sister-in-law, child's mother, almost collapsed from grief. I will never forget that day. It was heartbreaking and absolutely gut-wrenching to see what all they asked the parents to do in their state of grief. I witnessed my friend torn in 2 pieces, but it was supposed to be me. In 2006, I was part of a drum corps in Florida. We were having a drill camp over the weekend, so we all met up in Miami and took 2 15-passenger vans to drive up to Central Florida, both full. We took US 27, known as Okeechobee Road. At some point, just before sundown, we stopped at a McDonald's for dinner. I remember chatting it up with him, typical teenage stuff. The weirdest porno we ever saw, staying up to watch that scrambled channel that sometimes showed a boob, etc. We were in separate vans. We started loading up when one of the instructors decided my buddy and I should switch vans. I was confused, but sure, didn't matter to us. I sat in his seat, he went to the other van, and then last minute, the instructors decided we should switch back to how we were. Never quite figured out why, but it saved my life and ended my friends. A couple hours later, it's dark. US 27 has no lights at the time. Their van was behind us the whole time, till it wasn't. We were 6 miles from our destination when we got a call from the driver of the other van. We were in an accident. We're hurt. We sped back at 100 miles per hour, only to be met by a literal wall of semi-trailers blocking the 2-lane highway. We had to drive on the shoulder to get past them. As we round the trucks, I noticed they all had their headlights on. Illuminated on the road was my friend's body. His eyes were open, but all you could see were whites. His arms were very obviously broken at odd angles, but most alarming of all, he was torn completely in half. To say we were beside ourselves is an understatement. The van was laying on its side, completely mangled. The rest of the passengers were bloodied and bruised, but aside from a broken arm, they were generally okay. According to the driver, they hit wet pavement on a curve, lost control of the van, and it flipped. My friend was wearing a seatbelt, but he was pretty skinny. He slipped through the belt and broke through a passenger's side mirror. He flew approximately 30 yards over the grass median and landed on the opposite side of the highway. According to the driver, she was trying to climb out of the flipped van when she witnessed my friend trying to push himself up with his arms. An SUV was driving on the lane he was laying in. It hit him and killed him instantly. The SUV did not stop. They never found out who hit him. It sticks with me, 17 years later. I try to be grateful for the life I have. I was going to be in his seat. Happenstance saved me. I struggled with feeling like I deserved it. He was one of the good ones, and I was always struggling with my inner demons. I miss you, man. I hope you're all right, wherever you are. Rest in peace. I don't know. This sounds like some type of crazy Final Destination, I don't know, stuff. I'd watch out for Tony Todd if I were you. Crazy. Sorry. A month ago, I found my girlfriend dead on the bedroom floor after I fell asleep watching TV in the living room. She committed suicide using over-the-counter and prescription meds. When I found her, she was in full rigor mortis and was blue. Dramatic is an understatement. I still can't get over how quiet the house is. Now it's just me and the kitties. It's getting better though, one day at a time. Edit. After the massive outreach, I would like to tell everyone that I'm doing okay. I have lots of support and people that love me. I'm not going anywhere. Actually, I'm going across the country tomorrow to see my family. I know things will be better. Quick edit. I'm on a train somewhere in New Mexico heading east, and you all have brought tears to my eyes, joy to my heart, and peace to my troubled soul. When people say the Reddit community is toxic and hateful, I'm going to show them this. I'm a paramedic. We have a guy who we pick up from the nursing home all the time that has a long medical history, but basically he breathes through a tube, eats through a tube, pisses in a bag, shits in a bag. He's severely contracted and only has one leg. He lives his life in a bed unable to speak. His paperwork says he has dementia, but seems to be alert and oriented if you have him answer by blinking his eyes. It's so evident that he's miserable. We're constantly getting called because he uses the little bit of movement he has in his arms to pull out his feeding tube or his trach. His wife and son refuse to make him a DNR because he has insurance policies that haven't matured yet, so they're trying to keep him alive for a few more years so they can cash out. A few months ago, he was found pulseless and apnemic after pulling his oxygen off. The guys that got there got him back after a few rounds of CPR. Now he lives in constant pain from the compressions in addition to everything else, all because his family want his insurance money. Both his wife and son are total lowlifes too. Shock. I'm a nurse, and I picked up a shift at a local nursing home through an agency. One of the residents was a middle-aged woman debilitated by a massive stroke. Lights were on, but no one was home. She was awake but non-verbal, and the only emotion she would show was pain when she was moved around. She wouldn't even make eye contact or track you. She weighed 80 pounds, was contracted, basically looked like that tiny dying Voldemort in the last Harry Potter movie, and covered in pressure ulcers. She had no buttocks because the pressure wound had burrowed down to her bones. She could only move one of her hands, and she would grasp at her hips and butt anytime you moved her. For example, to clean up her urine or feces, and she would make these wounds bleed and sometimes even pick more chunks of flesh off. She had a G-tube for nutrition, which of course was infected. I had no idea how long she had been like this, or how she was even alive at this point. Thing was, this woman was a full code. Family wanted every intervention done to keep her alive. In my 8 years at the bedside, I have never been so livid at a patient's family. I have no idea why they insisted on that level of care, but it was downright evil to put that woman through all these interventions and then insist on CPR and intubation when she inevitably declines. I only picked up one shift with this agency before vowing to never walk in long-term care again, so I have no idea what became of her. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I was first on scene to a one-vehicle accident. When I arrived, I found a sedan head first into a tree, adult female in the driver's seat, alert but hysterical, and an 8-year-old girl laying outside of the vehicle in the weeds. I rushed to the girl and checked for pulse and airway. Neither was there. She had obvious signs of blunt force trauma and severe blood loss. I began compressions and eventually more units came onto the scene. It seemed like forever. The story is that the girl was in the back seat and not buckled in. Mom was under the influence of narcotics and veered off the highway, hitting the tree head-on at approximately 65 miles per hour. The little girl flew over the front seat, through the windshield, smacked the tree, and then flew into the grass and weeds. The girl did not make it. I struggle with this daily. Mom is in prison. Good. This was 3 years ago, and I can see it in my mind like it was yesterday. I can tell you exactly what she was wearing. The blood-curdling screams from the mother haunt me to this day, and I'll never forget this little angel's face. Rest in peace, Caitlin. Just horrible. Sorry. Thank you for trying to help that little girl, and hopefully this was a galvanizing moment for that mother, and I hope she got her life somewhere on track, but God. Oof. See, I blinked.